let's start by looking at in the context of performance. Where exactly you start?
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Simply PHP Unscripted podcast. I am not your host, but I'm substituting for today with Raf and Tony gone. We are here with the amazing Jason, who I'll be introducing you very soon. And today on this episode, we will be sharing and discussing the best practices to optimize your e-commerce websites in 2021. Now, a lot has happened over the course of, a year and a half now. So we want to do this episode to help you guys make sure you are scaling your online business and making sure you're applying all the best practices when it comes to web development. Now, I'm not going to be one sharing these tips with you. It's going to be our lead developer, our Magento dev, Jason, my main man. How you doing, brother?
I'm very good. Thanks for the introduction. Some of you may know me from exciting podcasts such as Shopify versus Magento, released about a year and a half ago.
This is a really interesting question, Shopify versus Magento. It comes up so often. Someone's like, oh, what's better, Shopify or Magento?
This was pre-pandemic, so I was, maybe 10 pounds thinner, so i.e. a lot better looking. But
you're still pretty handsome.
This is the package you're going to have to tolerate now. So, sorry, viewers.
Jason, what I want to talk to you about, what I want to get into with you is not only about web development, but some of the best practices, right? And focusing on what's going on with the market, right? A lot of things are changing. Businesses have gone under. Businesses have improved and scaled. How can we help these entrepreneurs who may not know much about web development? They could be a startup. They could be a mid-sized company, even large organizations. Where should we start? Like, where do business owners start this kind of process of optimizing their e-commerce website?
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things that happened over sort of because of COVID is you had a lot of e-commerce. So you had a lot of e-commerce companies that saw a sudden spike in traffic, okay? Because usually, let's say, as you're growing, it's more sometimes, it's a calculated growth, and then you can kind of see, your systems are lagging behind. You kind of maybe got time to, reach out and upgrade your systems and, add new features to it to make it faster. But what really put some business owners behind the ball is the ones that had e-commerce websites that were out of date and didn't follow certain modern practices. They were not able to scale up, and that affected their businesses quite significantly. So the crux of your question is, where do they start? Well, you got to evaluate it from the platform they're on. So obviously, this is going to apply to people that own their code and their infrastructure. They can make changes to it. So something like Shopify is completely proprietary. You won't be able to, this will be meaningless for you. And Shopify takes care of it for you. They do it very well. Talk to them if you need a speed increase, I'm sure.
So would this be more for someone in a larger scale organization, mid-size? Like, who are we giving this advice to?
Well, we're targeting people that, let's say, are on the Magento platform, something that we develop on, Cilius, any sort of platform where the infrastructure design and architecture is in their control.
Okay. So if you heard that right, so if you're on Shopify, you're a smaller business, probably this won't be the episode for you. Listen to it because we'll give you some good tips for when you go to Magento. But
it's Kyler and Jason. Who wouldn't want to watch that?
Awesome. So let's get back to it. So we know that they're on, you said Magento. What was the other platform that they could be
Cilius, but you can use a number of examples. You could be on WooCommerce, for instance, which is sort of the WordPress, extension for e-commerce. Any sort of system that you have that you control the infrastructure. There are some practices that you should be following so you can handle increase in loads.
And so let's get back to the starting conversation. Now we know who we're speaking to. If they're listening right now or watching right now, their ears are perked up because that's what the platform they're using. Where do they start? Do they go to their dev team? What do they say? How can we help guide them?
Yeah, and the first thing you want to do is separate. because that's a bit broad, the term web optimization. So are we talking about strictly performance? Are we also talking about SEO, which means getting your site out there, visible to more people? Fundamentally, they all come from that same sort of tree, and they branch out. So let's start by looking at in the context of performance. Where exactly you start? What you kind of need, what is important, is that you have a framework for understanding sort of, what are the modern tools that I need to be successful in this industry and scale. So I've outlined just a few sort of, these are, in my opinion, things that every e-commerce website that, you control the infrastructure should have. Obviously, caching systems is one of the things. So, and I'll get to that. But one thing that you should have is, most people are on AWS now. You could do this obviously not on AWS as well. It doesn't matter. But you should have some sort of auto-scaling mechanism. What I mean by that is that your code, basically in layman's term, your code is on a server. Let's call it a container. Now, when people want to talk to that container and get the latest information from it, if you have one, you can see how this is not very scalable. It's going to be overloaded. Now, if you can duplicate this container, it could have twins, and you could duplicate it and place it throughout multiple parts in the world so people can access it faster, you've now scaled your website. So there's vertical auto scaling and horizontal auto scaling. The scaling that this is more referring to with the distribution of it is the horizontal auto scaling. Vertical scaling is with the actual stack of the server.
Okay.
So what you're looking for is horizontal auto scaling. So if you are listening to this and you own a website and you're unsure, something you might want to ask your devs is, hey, can we look into, do we have an auto scaling mechanism in place? This is one of the principal ways of handling a huge load spike. And this is also important for even clients that are very spike oriented. So maybe you're very seasonal, maybe your site, if it doesn't have much traffic, or it has a decent amount of traffic, but it really gets hit hard around the Christmas time. Can you handle the Christmas load? And this Christmas load is probably what makes or breaks your business. So
this is to do with performance on the website.
Yeah, this
is
a performance issue. Yeah, this is a performance issue. So there's auto scaling. That's one of the big ones.
Okay.
One of the tenets of sort of what I would say modern websites in general. Goes even beyond e-commerce. The next one you're going to want is a non-file system cache. The reason why is because you can't really scale file system caches. So you, as a business owner, you might want to ask your devs, hey, do we have a global caching system such as Redis or in our application? And obviously caching, everyone kind of knows what caching is. It is extremely important, especially under load. If you turn off caching, sites literally can't function because, it just takes a few users to throw them in flux. So very important that you have a non-file system cache because you can scale that as well.
So without that, do you see that's a common issue with some of the clients that you have that they neglect?
It tends to be binary. And what I mean by that is we have certain clients that, they haven't invested much maybe in their infrastructure or their IT. It's out of date. And, they'll have some single server and just so what they don't need, like so far off it. Generally speaking, clients that have like auto scaling, they're going to have a global caching system in place as well. So it's very binary. Do you have all these things or do you not? It's very rare you'll go to a site, they have, all these fancy caches hooked up and they don't have like auto scaling as well. It's like, well, what are you doing? Because usually if you have that level of competency to set that up, you have the other. So it's a bit binary. So if you are concerned that you don't have any of these, then, definitely look at the tenets. You need, like I said, auto scaling, non-file system cache. And then the third sort of tenet that I was saying, there's a fourth one too, which is the CloudFront, which is how you distribute assets, but that's a bit less important for now. The third one is using an HTTP accelerator such as Varnish. Varnish is another layer of caching. So caching is all over. Even your PHP internally caches certain things called OP cache. Varnish is very important for handling high loads. So that basically looks at your HTTP request and it sees before it even hits your servers, hey, do I have this page and it sends back the page. And you can get fancy with varnish. You can change it around a little, and it's good for parsing out certain things that come in your headers as well. But as a business owner, you just need to know, hey, do I have varnish, which significantly accelerates websites? If you're in e-com and you got a decent amount of traffic in 2021, varnish is the gold standard. So definitely ask your devs if you have that installed.
I like that, because obviously with everything being online, if your site's not performing well, if it's not fast, if it doesn't react, if it's crashing, these are things that are going to upset your customer and make sure that they don't come back.
Yeah,
right. So
I mean, listen. Just everyone knows from personal experience. The slower the website, obviously, the more frustrating it is. And there's analytics behind it. There's plenty of research that's released every year that suggests, if your site is this much % slower than the average, you're losing this much percentage of revenue, and it snowballs as well, because it sort of leads into the other sort of thing that we would talk about, which is another optimization, which is SEO. Now, SEO, if you were to ask me a few years ago, it was all about meta titles and meta information, albeit that still holds true. That's very important. What Google does that is slowly gaining up in the rankings is page speed. So Google's going to record your page speed. Their crawlers are going to look at your page speed, and they're going to rank websites that have higher page speeds further.
So your Google ranking, they look at your page speed.
Yeah, that's part of their algorithm. Yeah.
Really? Wow.
So
I didn't know
this
that.
So one, it's a bad customer experience, and that snowballs with, you might be lower in sort of the Google page speed ranking. So you can see how that's an exponential effect, almost sort of a double whammy.
So if someone's, we're also in an era, this is my realm, and we're in an era of creating a lot of content, which will obviously put a lot of pressure on the site to perform, right? So will these tips help with because we make content here at Simply PHP on top of SEO, right? And our site's pretty fast, right? So are we implementing this on our site, on client site? Like, when you're adding more and more content every week, like we are, to our site, articles, videos, podcasts, you name it, would these practices still help?
Yeah, I mean, these practices will help your page speed time for sure. But again, we got to put things in context, because we can have a very fancy website, but it's not like we're an e-commerce site where you're going to have thousands of people every day. So even us, Simply PHP, even though we have the technical know-how to set up these things, it might be overkill and just dumb to put some of these things on our website.
I see.
Do we need varnish on we're
not an e-commerce business.
Yeah.
So.
Are we getting 10,000 views a day?
That I'd like to be there.
Our owners would like to think so. I'm skeptical because we're not Amazon.com.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. So that's a fair point. For someone with the customer base that's coming to their site, purchasing whatever product you have, these are the things you're going to be looking for. If you're looking to get to that state, this is something that you should be practicing, talking with your dev team, hiring someone like Simply PHP to consult or help implement that is an important step.
Yeah. And listen, this. There's things implicit to this, like the code quality of your actual application also affects performance significantly. There's no two ways around that. That's just, you got to write good code. You got to have developers that know what they're doing, and the platforms that you use, make sure they're good ones.
So we're talking about SEO, right? And I was asking a question about content. Let's get back on track to what you were saying about the page speeds and the SEO, and that's actually included in the algorithm of Google. I didn't know that if your page is slow, they're gonna not rank you as high in Google. Like that's huge.
Yeah, it's part of their calculation. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Like you talked about meta information, you talked about page speeds. Is there anything else included kind of with the SEO purpose of this?
It's not necessarily per se that the crawler this will affect, but like I said, good quality images matter. Make sure also when you're putting your images in, preferably they're sized correctly. When you put them in, it's going to be less for in storage and less in pre-processing for the images. So definitely make sure you have good quality images. A lot of clients, little tip out there, if you're a company and they're your own images, trademark them. I've seen a lot of theft of imagery. That's definitely a thing. Yeah, just make sure you have your categories sort of indexed in a way that the crawler have a sitemap, for instance. So when a crawler comes in, it knows to look for your sitemap, and that's sort of a treasure map of your website. This is quite important as well. And you could look certain things up too. Like there's certain ways you can present some of this information that Google likes. Google sort of a Google structure that they like, and you can those are things you can look up and you'll find 1,000 articles on. But as long as you know in concept that those things exist, I think is important.
Now, how does everything you just talked about affect mobile viewing? Because that is something that's on the rise, right? It's been on the rise for a long time. Since COVID, it's been on the rise even more. I don't know the percentages. I might write it in the description of this, the notes of the podcast when we go back and find it. But it's high. Does any of this affect that? Do we have to think about a mobile strategy when it comes to these practices? Like any ideas?
Well, for SEO, no, because when you set up your SEO, whether you're on desktop or mobile, it should be independent. It's really what matters between mobile and desktop is the look of your website. So every e-commerce website in 2021 has to work on mobile and desktop. There's no ifs and buts about that. Most of the transactions on e-commerce are done through mobile. Obviously, there's sort of a rise of PWA, which is basically a mode of thinking almost in certain frameworks built around it that suggests that your website when you create it, it's going to look like an application on the phone. This is very this is becoming very trendy as well.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely your site has to be responsive. It has to work on mobile and on desktop. There's no two ways around about
and
that.
then the auto scaling, the non-cache, the non-file system cache, varnish, those all like work on mobile, no problem.
Yeah, that's totally independent on what the user agent is coming from.
Okay, so we talked about auto scaling. We talked about SEO. What's the next thing? What's the next step for a business owner to look at their website and says, okay, I need to improve it for their busy season or for the next 6 months? Where the day that we're recording this, or at the end of June, we're going into the next 6 months of 2021. So what else can they do?
I mean, listen, you can Google a million things for, optimize my page speed, put my JavaScript in a bundle, merge it. Yeah, I mean, those are things that, anyone can figure out on their own. I think the next sort of question for a business owner is maybe more philosophical. In that sense, is are you on the right platform? Do you need to really significantly change your infrastructure, stuff like that? So these are things that it's part of your infrastructure, but you really got to evaluate where you're at. Sort of where I'm getting at is again the you do it yourself infrastructure. Or versus SaaS products. That you can't escape that conversation when doing a topic like this. A lot of business owners need to evaluate: is it even worth it for me to be managing all this myself, or should I consider a platform such as Shopify or BigCommerce, which they control all this? So that's a question that could lead to a whole other discussion.
No, but it's important because you're looking at the root of how to optimize a site. There's only certain things you can do on a platform, right? So knowing is this the platform for me to grow? Have I exhausted all the things that I can on this platform or on my open source, right? What kind of questions would someone ask themselves to help make that decision? Let's help them. Let's guide them through this process. If I'm the business owner and I'm evaluating my site and my infrastructure, how do I do that?
Well, you got to ask, how much is it costing you to maintain it yourself? Are you paying a bunch of devs, blah, blah, blah? Then the question is, can my business requirements be met in a SaaS product, so software as a service, so a product that already exists out there, and I just need to sort of log in and manage the admin. It's already built out for me. And if you've come to that decision, then your sort of business rules and practices can be captured by something like Shopify, that's when you start to give it consideration, because that can then now save you a lot of money, and you can still scale with these products as well, as long as your business requirements don't fundamentally change, that you need something extra. So it's really the ease of use versus the flexibility. If you really think that the ease of use and you're never going to need certain additional flexibility that these products don't offer, then you're definitely a candidate for SaaS. And then this makes this whole conversation that we just said, kind of redundant for you, because you won't have anxiety on this, because those products will set everything up for you in the way that they think is best possible.
So then how does that help? Like, so if I'm evaluating this, the infrastructure, right? And yeah, it's costing me a lot of stress. It's keeping me up at night, doing it all myself. Magento, right? I mean, you could do it yourself, right? I mean, with the help of a developer, but from an admin side, if I'm correct, you could do a lot on your own, or not really?
So Magento in specific. So yeah, Magento has basically two products: open source, which is basically anyone can download it and set it up. You will need a developer to help you to do this. A Magento developer in particular to help you set it up. There is the commerce package, where you get sort of bonus features and additional basic commerce features, and you get some alleged support from the Magento core team. And you can, and then you could either go with their cloud option, where they host it for you on their sort of infrastructure that they've built out. You can adjust some things, and you could work with them to change some things, but like a good crux of it is already built for you. Or you can take just the commerce features and its core code, and you build up your own infrastructure. Yeah, you can go either way.
Okay. So,
but Magento's not really a SaaS product.
Okay.
They're trying to move a bit in that direction, but they're not there yet. You'll definitely need because even you'll be on Magento because you want sort of flexibility to add customizations. And if you're doing customizations to the code, your own modules, your own sort of unique features, that's even though the core team can host on the cloud for you, they're not going to help you with that. That you need to find a Magento dev proper to build those out.
Now, I don't want to make this a Shopify versus Magento conversation, but you brought up the infrastructure, right? And someone who's not a dev, who's, I'm the business owner in this role play, who's evaluating, what platform I should use. Earlier we were saying like, there's limitations to your Shopify. If I'm getting a certain amount of traffic, if I wanted to implement some of the tips that you said, Magento, or I forget the third one, might be a better fit, right? So walk me through a little bit around, and you kind of alluded to it before, but I want to get into this conversation right now because it is around optimizing your site, right? Which platform should I really consider? Like, is there a checklist you have in mind, or some type of, I'm trying to think of like a way to help the people listening or watching this right now know which infrastructure they should choose?
Yes, the checklist is watch the Shopify versus Magento video. No, in all honesty, that again, that can branch off into conversation itself. It's really about evaluating your business needs, where you think they're going to be in the future, and can these sort of already we'll call them SaaS pre-built products, basically, can they fulfill that? If they can, that's honestly a cheaper option, and for business stability, possibly the way to go. Because when you're paying devs to manage your infrastructure and build out your infrastructure, one, it's more expensive, and riskier too. Shopify is a company that has thousands of people working on their product to make sure that it's stable. Your own devs, what if one of them quits? What if one of them goes away? What if one of them gets sick, or just there's more unknowns that can occur, basically. But yeah, that's a conversation in itself. But
another podcast.
It really just boils down to that. It's about business requirement evaluation. There's many things to consider. Like on Magento, you own your code. Shopify can take you off for whatever reason. Let's say if you're selling something they view immoral or they don't want on their platform, they can take you off, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
To me, that's a big conversation in optimizing your site, because you said it, like the infrastructure you have is a big, like it's what you use to sell your products, it runs your business, right? So making sure you're on the right platform, to me, is like the biggest kind of question I think business owners should take away with. And then once they understand that, then they can apply some of these strategies that you're talking about: auto scaling, the non-file system cache, varnish, SEO optimization, search engine optimization, all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Exactly it. I mean, listen, you're going to have to do some SEO. For SEO, you're going to have to kind of do that on Shopify as well. You got to fill out meta information yourself, for instance. But you're definitely at the crux of it.
Okay. Nice. Is there anything else that we might have missed for optimizing the site? Anything that I haven't touched on?
Yeah, I mean, listen, when I say non-file system cache, it should be evident that, caching in general needs to be present on your website wherever possible. Now, when you're now you can go into more details, when you set up your caching, like how does it deal, but this is not the point of the conversation. I could say, oh, yes, well, when Redis is full, should it do LFU or LRU, or least frequently used versus last used object that is stored in the persistent storage. That's not appropriate for this conversation. It's about, do you have the fundamentals, meaning do I have the global caching system there? Do I have the auto scaling potentially there? Do I have the HTTP accelerator and varnish there? Things to mention that, a cloud front to deliver your assets, quicker. Your database, most people are going to be on Amazon. Is it an RDS database that can, scale? Do you have read replicas in there? So let's say if you have a BI team and they're doing sort of operations on that, they're not, putting latency on the database that you actually write data to. There's considerations like that as well. Those are all things that, you will have to look into and consider.
Okay. Awesome.
And hopefully this gives you an idea of where to start.
I think so. I think this has been a good, quick little conversation. You definitely educated me on how to optimize a site. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else you want to touch on?
Listen, because this infrastructure that gets built, if you can go now and, you can get a dev on what are these latest trendy sites, Fiverr.com or something. Certainly that would be cheaper than hiring an agency, but at an agency, you have the competency to do both, build the application code and also build the infrastructure environment as well. That's very important as well. This is something and this requires experience, because there's always issues you run into, and a lot of these issues are, you solve them as a function of experience often. So this is sort of, maybe this could also be, why would you do an agency over, the cheaper alternative of just hiring a single dev that you have as a contractor? This is definitely one of the big reasons why. It's because of the entire skill set that you get.
Awesome. That's going to be a whole nother podcast in itself.
Yeah.
Before we dive deep into that. But that's a good, honestly, for a future podcast. We've talked about that before, but really diving deep into that topic, I think would be important, because it's very controversial what we should do, right? People say go to Fiverr. People say hire an agency. It's hard to know which is best, right? But thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. It was a nice quick one with Jason, my main man. Thank you so much for coming on. It was really, it's different, eh? It's nice to have us on the show. I don't know where Tony and Rafa are, but
yeah. I don't know either. Let's see. What are some certain parting words? Chelsea is champions of Europe. Only London club to do it. Sorry, Arsenal fans. Sorry, Tottenham fans. Yeah. Hey, go
awesome.
Habs.
Go. Yeah, I was just about to say that. Go Habs. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening or watching. Again, please feel free to send us your questions, comment your questions, your concerns, whatever. If you like this structure, if you like the shorter form pieces of podcast content, let us know, because it would really help me. I don't know about you, but it would really help me. So, without further ado, thank you guys so much for listening and for watching. We are signing off. Take care.